The Pokemon Adventures manga is one of the best ways to enjoy Pokemon, and it's always been. Ever since the Red, Blue and Green arc, we've had fantastic storylines, awesome characters and all kinds of situations never before seen in the Pokemon games or anime. And in the middle of all of those, well, we got some pretty crazy stuff. So hey, I'm not so a strainer, and that's disturbing and spoilery. Let's get into it. I'm gonna start with one of the most recognizable panels in Pokemon Adventures, and that is the Arbok being torn to pieces. In the beautiful Pokemon universe, while you hear about death from time to time, you don't really witness it, at least not directly. I mean, the whole research facility did fall on Lysander after all. But here, Koga's Arbok is decapitated by Blue's Charmeleon after he first tried to melt it using the move Acid. Here, that thing is not going to lower your special defense, it will actually turn your partner to Pokemon sauce. While this was indeed a shock when I first saw it, well, it all ends up okay, because later in the story we find out that Arbok can actually regenerate parts of itself, and this becomes a theme with a lot of these disturbing moments. So now subscribe to the channel and let's move on to the next one that has something to do with our favorite, Mewtwo. This legendary Pokemon has many origin stories, and the manga is different from every single one of them on one very specific thing. In every other story, Mewtwo is purely created from Mew's DNA, but here, Mew's DNA was not enough, and so Blaine, who is the creator, adds a little bit of himself into the mix. Things don't go as planned, and some of Mewtwo's cells do end up on his arm, and so they sense each other. But of course, Mewtwo is a pretty angry fellow, and so the cells start eating their way through Blaine, with him admitting that it would eventually kill him. They both end up fine, with Mewtwo shutting down the advances of its cells, but their bodies are still connected, and if they battle for too long or if Mewtwo battles for too long, their bodies will suffer the consequences, with Blaine's, well, shutting down completely. Eventually, Entei does make things okay for both of them, but it's still very weird how Blaine decided to go about the whole thing. Now let's move on to the next one that takes us to Diamond and Pearl. By simply looking at Giratina, we can already assume that that Pokemon isn't the safest thing to have around, and Diamond and Pearl found that out the hard way when Karen pushed Giratina to use Shadow Force on the latter. At the last second, Diamond pushed Pearl out of the way, very heroic, only to be impaled by the legendary Pokemon Shadow himself. Pearl tried his best to wake him up, but he didn't, and then suddenly, his body distorts and disappears. That was pretty disturbing, and it was made even worse by how Reg, Diamond's Regigigas, just left. It really made it seem like he was done. It was only a bit later that we find out how things turned out and where he was, but it's still pretty weird that they don't mind getting children really hurt in the manga. And now, let's move on to Johto. Pryce, in the games, appears to be an ice-loving man that is simply a gym leader and nothing more. But just like a bunch of the Kanto gym leaders are part of Team Rocket or the Kanto Elite Four is world-dominating kinds of evil, well, in the manga, Pryce is the masked man. In the past, he used Ho-Oh to kidnap children that he saw as potential great trainers in order to form his own organization. This includes Silver and Green. These two escape, but the rest never saw their families again and eventually become admins in his version of Team Rocket after its fall in Kanto. It's insane how a simple old man can have such distinct approaches to its character, with the manga version of Pryce coming within an icicle of killing Gold and Silver. They really go crazy on it. But now, let's see a little bit more of that in Hoenn. So, we all know how Rayquaza is the answer to stopping Kyogre and Groudon, right? Well, Norman knew it as well, and he went to get Rayquaza himself in order to do it. But, since there's no green orb to help out with the controlling Ray part, Norman had to do it by force, which ended up not only with physical wounds, but also mental wounds, and his art couldn't handle it. He died, but not before putting the guilt on Ruby, of course. Norman was a pretty mean guy in the manga. But the disturbing part is how Max's Houndoom just completely burned Norman in order to be sure that there was no chance he was going to pull another crazy thing again. Of course, while Norman cannot regenerate like Arbok, well, Celebi can do some pretty interesting things with time, and things do end up okay, but Archie and Maxie, their manga versions, are literally insane. But for now, let's stay in Hoenn a little bit longer and check out on Zinnia. Zinnia, both in the games and the manga, has a pretty simple goal: to carry the Draconid lore and form a bond with Rayquaza. But as we found out by this Pokemon's first kill, Norman, that isn't that easy to do. Still here, things go a little bit crazier than they do there. Zinnia, just like in the games, is turned down, but unlike the games, Rayquaza stabs Zinnia in her stomach with its tail. That's crazy, but it's not all. No, Rayquaza has a little bit more. Ray then proceeds to raise her up in front of itself, only to let out a massive hyper beam on the poor girl. This has to be one of the craziest moments in all of the Pokemon manga, and weirdly enough, Zinnia doesn't regenerate or Celebi doesn't do anything. She simply survives like the absolute warrior that she is. And now for the final one, let's go to Unova. And no, it's not gonna be the crucified gym leaders, but that's pretty crazy as well. Ghetsis is insane. We know this, and it doesn't change in Pokemon Adventures. In fact, I'd say that it goes to the extreme in Pokemon Adventures. After controlling N for the Black and White arc and even trapping him inside the Dark Stone in Black 2 and White 2, N eventually still saves him after the Plasma Frigate explodes. And N also tells Ghetsis that he still loves him as a father. So what does Ghetsis do when faced with this information? Well, it simply beats up N until he is unconscious and bleeding while calling him a monster. Then, as N falls to the ground, Ghetsis simply laughs like the maniac villain that he is. To me, this is the craziest one we've ever had, since it simply shows us pure violence from one human to another, from a grown man to his son, in a world where we expect to see Pokemon being the ones doing the battling. And that is all I have for you today, 7 disturbing moments in the Pokemon manga in no particular order. But what about you? Would you add anything else to the list? Let me know in the comments down below. And now, like the video if you like it, dislike if you don't, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more Pokemon content, and also ring the bell so you know when the next video is out. Also, you can become a channel member or check out my merch to further support the channel. I'll be forever thankful for that. You can follow me on social media or check out one of my streams here and on Twitch every day of the week. All the links are in the description. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all on the next one.